The road leading to the Hollow Pines Hotel had not felt the weight of tires in decades, and as Emma and her three friends, Mark, Liv, and Jonas, pushed through the twisted remnants of rusted iron gates and overgrown weeds that clawed at their ankles like hungry fingers from beneath the earth, none of them could suppress the cold breath of unease that slithered down their spines, though each masked it with laughter that rang hollow in the thinning air. They had come on a dare, fueled by stories of a hotel abandoned since a winter storm 30 years prior, when guests and staff alike vanished without a trace, leaving behind only untouched rooms and the legend of a midnight bell that no hand should ever ring. The hotel loomed before them, its facade a crumbling corpse of Victorian grandeur, with broken windows like dead eyes and weather-worn stonework that bled rusted stains down its face, while the wind whispered secrets through the skeletal remains of ornamental ironwork and the skeletal black trees that stood like ancient sentinels in the fog-wrapped clearing. Their flashlights trembled in the dark as they stepped inside, their boots crunching over shattered glass and brittle leaves, the air heavy with mildew and rot, the overwhelming smell of decay so thick it clung to their tongues. Inside, the grand lobby yawned like the open maw of a forgotten cathedral, where faded red carpet stretched into shadowed corridors and the cracked chandelier above, its crystals clouded with grime, hung like a decapitated spider, swaying ever so slightly despite the stillness, and in the center of it all stood the reception desk, warped with moisture and time, and perched atop it, the infamous brass bell, small, unassuming, tarnished by years of neglect, yet gleaming faintly as if some unseen hand polished it still. First to ring it is cursed forever, Liv teased, though her voice quivered, and Mark, ever the bravest, or perhaps the most foolish, grinned and pressed a finger to the bell, the sound sharp and brittle in the cavernous emptiness, its chime echoing unnaturally long, as if the very walls remembered it and sang it back in rusted whispers. The moment stretched taut, every heartbeat amplified in their ears, until the tension broke with nervous laughter, but none of them truly relaxed. They explored, room after room, each chamber more decayed than the last. A dining hall where tables remained set with tarnished silverware encrusted in dust and cobwebs that dripped like wet silk, a once opulent ballroom where moth-eaten curtains billowed from broken windows and some black smear, stained the center of the parquet floor in a shape that looked almost human, and through every hallway, past peeling wallpaper that sloughed off the walls like dead flesh, they found footprints, child-sized, bare, too small to belong to any of them, tracked through the dust in winding patterns that led nowhere and everywhere at once. Time slipped strangely within those walls. By the time they returned to the lobby, the sky outside had darkened to an unnatural black, the kind of darkness that pressed against glass and skin alike, and when Emma checked her phone, the glowing numbers seemed wrong somehow. 11:57 p.m., the second sluggish, distorted. Jonas tried to joke, better get ready for the witching hour. But even his forced grin faltered as the ancient grandfather clock near the fireplace, its face cracked and hands missing, began to tick, each mechanical grind of unseen gears painfully audible in the suffocating quiet. They froze, staring in horror as the impossible unfolded, and then, ding. The bell on the desk rang by itself, a brittle sound that struck bone-deep fear into Emma's marrow. Ding, ding. Each chime pulled the air colder, the temperature plummeting so rapidly that their breath came out in clouds, trembling on the air. The shadows in the corners of the lobby writhed, twisting in unnatural shapes that defied explanation, and Emma felt something move inside her, some primal recognition of ancient wrongness, her heart beat a frantic drum in her ears. They ran to the doors, yanking, kicking, screaming. But the old wood held fast as if fused to the very frame of the building, and the windows, no matter how hard they struck, remained like polished stone, unbreakable. The bell rang again, and this time, they heard it, footsteps, heavy, deliberate, creaking from the staircase above. "We have to hide," Liv gasped, her voice barely a whisper, but already shapes were descending. Figures half-shrouded in shadow, wearing tattered formal attire from some bygone era, their faces pale and bloodless, with eyes that glowed faintly white in the darkness, vacant, inhuman, yet smiling, always smiling, their mouths stretched too wide as if skin itself was peeling from the strain. The bell tolled once more. They screamed, scattering, the group torn apart by terror as the phantoms glided, not walked, not ran. glided soundlessly across the mold-stained floor, arms outstretched, teeth gleaming too sharp under the flicker of failing flashlight beams. And the night consumed them. The darkness inside the Hollow Pines Hotel grew thicker, heavier, a tangible thing that pressed against Emma's skin as she stumbled blindly down a corridor that twisted in impossible angles, her breath a thin wheeze of panic while behind her, somewhere in the ink-black night. The bell tolled again, its metallic chime now warped and wet, as if struck by a hand no longer human, and with each ring her vision blurred and her heart splintered into frantic shards of terror too large for her chest to contain. She screamed for the others, Mark, Liv, Jonas. But the hotel seemed to swallow her voice, the sound devoured by walls that pulsed like living flesh beneath peeling wallpaper, her flashlight flickering wildly as the beam caught glimpses of framed portraits where faces had been violently scratched out, the paper beneath shredded into gaping wounds that bled black stains down the walls like tears. She ran, her feet slipping over rotted carpet, until she crashed through a warped door and fell sprawling onto icy tile, the door slamming shut behind her with a deafening boom that echoed into forever. The room she had entered was vast, circular, and impossibly wide for the dimensions of the building, and as she lifted her head she saw that every inch of the curved walls was covered in ancient mirrors. Tall, narrow, some cracked, some pristine, all reflecting her image back at her in grotesque distortions. In some she was flayed raw, her skin sloughing from muscle. In others her eyes bled rivers of black ichor while her jaw hung unhinged, teeth impossibly long, and though she knew they were mere reflections, the images began to move independently, twitching, reaching, twisting when she did not, until one by one the mirror-emis turned to look directly at her, their wide dead eyes glowing faintly white like the ghosts descending the staircase moments before. A shriek split the air, Liv's voice. And Emma scrambled to her feet, pounding on the door, but it would not open, and the reflections began to tap their glass prisons from the inside, soft at first, then louder, frantic, until hairline fractures spidered across the ancient glass and she could see the faint outlines of hands, fleshless, bone-white, pressing outward, the mirror surface stretching like skin over bone, until with an ear-splitting shatter the first one exploded outward and a hand, not her own, grasped her wrist, its grip icy, its nails black as void, pulling her toward the mirror's jagged maw. She screamed, kicking, tearing herself free just as more mirrors ruptured in unison, countless versions of herself, each one grotesque, mutilated, pouring from the glass like water, their mouths stretched in identical grins, their hands reaching for her hair, her flesh, their breathless voices whispering in perfect unison, "Join us, join us, join us." Emma fled, tripping, bleeding, her arms slashed by shards of falling glass, until she found another door, this one rusted, half-hinged, forcing her way through it into another pitch-black hallway, where somewhere, very close now, the bell chimed once more, a low, guttural tone that vibrated through her bones and made her teeth ache with the wrongness of it. Mark was lost. Somewhere between screams and shadow he had stumbled into the dining hall again, but it was different now. The tables fully set, candles burning low, though the wax ran black instead of white, and the guests seated around the long banquet table were impossibly still, their faces obscured by rotted silk veils, their hands brittle and skeletal where they rested on the tablecloth, and though they did not move, he felt their eyes upon him, empty sockets burning with icy malice. The smell was unbearable, a stench of decay so thick it choked him. And he realized the plates before each figure held meat, raw and glistening, still twitching as if freshly torn from living bodies. The centerpiece was a grotesque sculpture made of bones wired together in a mockery of a human shape, its hollow skull crowned with what might have once been hair but now was only withered strands of black. The bell rang from somewhere deep within the building. One by one, the veiled guests lifted their heads, the sound of creaking bone like dry branches snapping in the cold, and Mark saw through gaps in the silk the grinning faces, jawless, eyeless, split and stitched. Some with teeth but no lips, others with empty, gaping holes where faces should have been, and still they smiled, rising in unison as their blood-blackened hands reached for him, their brittle feet scraping over the wood as they glided soundlessly closer, the table groaning as the dishes began to bleed dark liquid that dripped to the floor in steaming rivulets. Mark ran. He didn't look back. He ran until his lungs burned and his heart thundered, until he smashed through a door that led, impossibly, into the hotel's decaying kitchen, where rusted meat hooks swung gently from the ceiling, and in the center of the room stood Jonas, or what was left of him, stripped to the waist, his skin flayed in neat surgical lines, his eyes wide, mouth still working soundlessly as something, some shape in the shadows, peeled another layer from his chest with glacial patience. Mark's scream was a broken thing as the bell tolled again, louder now, closer. Liv awoke on the grand staircase, her head pounding, her hands sticky with blood that wasn't hers, her memories fragmented. She remembered faces, the bell, the cold, but now she was alone, or so she thought until the sound of soft weeping pulled her attention upward, where a figure in a tattered wedding dress stood at the top of the stairs, her veil shivering as she sobbed, her hands clutching the fabric over her heart. Liv's breath caught. She called out, but the figure turned slowly, lifting her veil to reveal a face that was not a face at all, just an open, screaming void of black, endless darkness where features should have been, and as the bride descended one step at a time, her body began to split, to rupture, limbs elongating unnaturally, the bones beneath her skin snapping outward with wet cracks, her head tilting too far as the sobs deepened into guttural animal wails that vibrated the very air. Liv fled into the upper hallways, but no matter how many doors she passed, the corridors seemed endless, looping, the floors breathing beneath her feet, the wallpaper now alive with twitching patterns that moved like insects under flesh. When she finally forced open one door, she found herself in a child's nursery, the walls papered with grinning clowns whose eyes wept real blood, and in the corner a crib rocked gently. Empty save for a single severed hand clutching a rattle that moved back and forth though no wind stirred the air. The bell rang, louder, louder. Emma, Mark, and Liv, broken, bloodied, hollow-eyed, found each other at last in the lobby where it had all begun, the brass bell gleaming untouched on the desk though none of them could recall how they had returned. Their bodies bore wounds they could not explain, bite marks, deep scratches, bruises shaped like hands. And when they spoke their voices were cracked, raw, barely human. The clock struck midnight. The bell rang. The walls split open like rotten fruit, and from the darkness poured the hollow ones, faces stretched, bodies grotesque, arms like spider limbs, and the friends screamed, fought, clawed, but the phantoms swarmed them, tearing flesh from bone, peeling, unraveling, until only fragments remained, blood-slicked walls, teeth without owners, hands still twitching with electric spasms. The bell tolled 13 times. And when morning came, the Hollow Pines Hotel stood silent once more, its doors ajar, its halls empty save for the soft echo of laughter and the distant ring of a bell that would never stop.